My name is Eugene. My name is Eugene Chrysler L. I'm the community organizer for Moses, which stands for Madison Organizing Strength, Equity, and Solidarity. Moses is an interfaith-based nonprofit organization that seeks to reform the criminal legal system and dismantle all forms of racial inequities and anything that contributes to them. I want to thank you for coming today to Juneteenth celebration with Kuji Chagalia. And I also want to thank our panelists here for joining us. Jerome Dillard. Unfortunately, couldn't get the sheriff. He had something else come up. And our other panelist, James Morgan, who will be joining us shortly. Also want to say about myself that I have 4 children and I have a wonderful fiance. I also am a directly impacted individual of the criminal legal system. Today we have Jerome and James, who will be discussing the modern day prison, modern day slavery, and what that looks like. Jerome Dillard is the director of Expo, Ex Incarcerated People Organizing. Expo is led by directly impacted individuals who have made a strong base throughout the state of Wisconsin. I would like to give this moment to let Jerome introduce himself and give you more of a background of who he is and how he ended up in the role that he is in now. Jerome?
Oh, thank you, James. As James said, I'm Jerome Dillard. I am the Executive Director of Ex-Incarcerated People Organizing, which often is referred to as Expo. Expo, we started in 2014. We actually grew and formed a statewide organization in 2017, and we became our own entity, meaning a 501c3 in 2019. Our work consists of working with system impacted individuals, as Eugene referred to, directly impacted. I generally use that as a term for individuals who have been impacted by the criminal legal system, period. I'm honored to be here today. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. And it's my hopes that everyone will leave here more informed. I'll talk about a couple of campaigns that we have going as far as Expo as a statewide organization. Our main campaign is Unlock the Vote. Unlock the Vote is to restore voting rights for over 45,000, close to 46,000 individuals in our state who are working, paying taxes, and being productive citizens, but yet they do not have the right to vote. We launched this campaign in 2019. We're going in our second year, and I might as well pitch it. We can really use the support of those of you in our community. We have been educating our community around felony disenfranchisement and prison gerrymandering for the past 4 years. One thing for certain and 2 things for sure is individuals who are paying taxes but yet have no say in their in the political process, or who represents their community, who represents their children on school boards, or even who represents these individuals in Washington, D.C. Taxation without representation is what this country was built on. And we're putting emphasis that individuals who are working hard every day and paying taxes should be able to cast a ballot. It's Jim Crow tactics from Reconstruction, from the time of Reconstruction, I'll put it that way, and still flourishing today. And what's saddened about it is Wisconsin lags behind all Midwestern states. All around us, individuals can vote once they are out of correctional facilities. Locked Up on the Outside addresses the long terms of a supervision that individuals are having after they do their time in correctional facilities. Truth in sentencing really gave individuals two sentences. One would be time served inside a correctional facility or on probation. And the second part would be the supervision. That's a sentence that follows that term that you've spent incarcerated on the truth in sentencing. And what we're seeing in Wisconsin is one of the worst in the country for terms for the time that individuals spend on supervision or under the thumb of community corrections in our state. It's not unusual to hear someone who's on paper or supervision for 10 years, 15 years, in some cases 20 years. I have a staff member in the office right next to me who has been out for 3 years, working, paying taxes, and a very productive citizen, but yet he cannot cast a ballot until 2045. It's just not right. So those are two of the campaigns we have. There's other people in politics where we're educating individuals who have been impacted, but have on how the political system works and what individuals are standing on who are running for these offices. Not only do we need to vote, but we have to be informed and educated voters. I think I went a little long on my introduction, but I'm going to pass it back to you, Eugene.
Well, well, thank you, Jerome. That was a really clear and concise, representation of what you guys are doing. Just very good descriptive. I also want to let you know that we will not have a whole 2 hour for this. I think we'll end up roughly a little bit sooner than that. I don't think it'd take a whole 2 hours, but I also wanted to make sure that we understand why this is all important, right? And this is the modern day slavery. So I'm going to screen share real quick what I am looking at and what we will be looking at to, can you see that, Jerome?
Yes, I can.
Okay. So we're talking about the prison industrial complex and modern day slavery and the 13th Amendment. And these are the sections from the 13th Amendment that neither slavery nor involuntary servitude except as punishment for crime whereof the parties shall have been duly convicted shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. And then in section 2, which sets us up for Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. This is how the 13th Amendment in Black codes has implemented involuntary slavery via prison industrial complex and other areas. Blacks never stopped being slaves to white supremacy in America, which we go into the vagrancy laws of Jim Crowism and what the definition of Black codes mean, which means to restrict newly freed slaves from their liberties and to keep up white supremacy. Now, we could go and read the transcript of the proclamation from the President Abraham Lincoln, but I would suggest that you read that for yourself, because we really are looking at these sections right here and how those sections have been utilized to continue to oppress people of color and just people who are disenfranchised and people with no money. And so I will also have a video. I will show a video, but before I do that, I wanted to read, before I go into that and the questions, I've prepared for questions, but before I go into that, I wanted to read something that I wrote, which was a thought of mine that I had that started at 17 years old. When I first went to jail, that was 20 years ago, and how I was mistreated and abused. I found myself in a cell that had writing written all over it. And one day in cell inspection, there was a cell inspection, and a deputy, along with his comrades, demanded me to clean it up. And I said, at 17 years old, I said, I didn't do that. Next thing I know, I was getting handcuffed and taken to the hole. In that moment, I realized and said to myself, this is a modern day slavery. And so from that time up until a year ago, had this thought. And so I'm going to read this thought that I had. Um, and then I wrote a year ago, and I called it Jim Crow, Willie Lynch. Um, and so let's take a few moments to acknowledge some harsh truths about systemic oppression and how far back these horrific, intrusive, and diabolical methods go. The use of biblical texts, masterminding over slaves from the past to slaves of the modern day society. Servitude goes back since the beginning of time, from a higher power serving us for the creation of life to the construction and reconstruction in today's society. These unsettling truths are methods that control people in a system we proudly support in our everyday life. Sadly, we are unaware of how we support these oppressions amongst each other in many, if not all systems, from justice system, healthcare system, housing, educational, economical systems, just to name a few, which is a major player of Jim Crowism, and that I call Willie Lynch syndrome. These systems are diabolic and so deeply embedded in our American history and across the planet, very much so in American society, still to this day. Let's take a deeper look into Jim Crowism and how it's rooted from the Willie Lynch syndrome. Jim Crowism is a practice of discrimination against Blacks by legal enforcement or traditional sanctions. I would testify that these days, not only are the disenfranchised affected by these isms, but also poor whites as well. White privilege may be a factor in the case, but I'm not speaking on that issue at this moment. Jim Crow has been constructed through the Black's Codes, which is a definition in the Black's Law Dictionary. It's defined as restricting newly freed slaves of their liberties and to keep up white supremacy. This encompasses a holistic perspective to the livelihood of the disenfranchised and poor whites. Housing has its part. Fathers have been displaced from the household and placed into institutions. That leaves a man fighting against the odds for success and his role in a child's life and home. So a system called welfare replaced him now. Mom is left to play both roles as father and mother. Mother becomes dependent to work two jobs to make up for the fatherless home. This situation opens the door for the school to prison pipeline. This happens to be the case because mom is overworked and school becomes a disciplinary in place of the father. The housing systems regulate who is eligible for programs, and unfortunately, when you have a felony and are sent to prison, you are automatically restricted from Section 8. This is a tactic to keep families apart and a dependency for public assistance. I mentioned education briefly, so I will expound on what I mean about school to prison pipeline. When a child is disciplined at school, they are sent to detention. Before this happens, by the time they are in third grade, they are given tests to examine how many prison beds are needed for the adolescent generation. I would like to go more in depth, but I suggest looking into the documentary 13. There's a great breakdown for this topic, which now thinking it's a good segue into the new Jim Crow mass incarceration by Michelle Alexander. Prison is a warehousing where many people are forgotten and left at the mercy of those in their care. As we know, slavery has been abolished except when one commits a crime. Then they are remanded to involuntary servitude. To keep this agenda and system running, ordinances and traffic laws are then turned criminal. This is a serious issue with the DOC, Department of Corrections. Hearsay and assumption of wrongdoing can send someone back to prison. The individual have worked 10 times harder to be a positive tax-paying citizen, but can be abruptly taken out of the community and warehoused, leaving everything behind and stripped away from family, job, income, housing, and a lot of times loss of support networks. They are back to starting over from nothing, many times over. What does this say to unconscious people who look to the media for information and truth? So the media sways how we see and respond with prejudice towards people who are fighting an uphill battle for success. Other issues like healthcare is not just out in the community, but within institutions. Service is non-existent, but on paper, it said that treatment has been provided. where you are at the mercy of medical staff. The interaction by the medical staff isn't so polite and with prejudice. If you ask for services that that would normally receive in that you would normally receive in the community, you're denied and treated with carelessness. In fact, you feel like you're treated worse than an animal. When a dog is sick, you take the precious living being to the vet, and it is cared for with love. In institutions, you have to be dying before getting medical treatment. In the institutions, race isn't the issue. It's the treatment and the dignity that an individual has left that gets trampled on. Healthcare within society is a different issue. Underserved people, race, and economics becomes a major problem. Depending on what you can afford will determine what your coverage is. Now I have to admit, I'm a huge advocate for health and wellness. My doctor and I have a great relationship. In my culture, mental health is stigmatized. Hopefully not for much longer. The ideology has been that if you say you have mental health issues, then you're weak and not a man. So trauma gets overlooked, and this is a very big part of the issue when these learned behaviors of not taking mental health seriously. We will find many lost and misunderstood youth growing up in a complex society. This becomes a health crisis within the underserved communities. If we raise our youth to wear a mask to hide our trauma, we would be doing a disservice for them as parents, and as so the cycle continues. With that being said, where are we leading our youth to? We haven't taught them skills to be more than what our society paints for us. Employment becomes hard to obtain because of a lack of skills, which a lot of times the street life becomes a common choice in the underserved community, and survival becomes a main instinct for them. No job and no employment history could mean more crime. I remembered applying for work. When I applied on the window, there was a sign saying hiring. Days after days, I followed up, and response I'd get would be, we'll keep you on file. A month later, the sign hiring would still be at that window. There was something wrong with this picture. Equal employment opportunity was a false advertisement. Systemic oppression is so deeply rooted in our society, and it comes in many forms. It's done by design in such a way that it operates on its own by learning behaviors, like a horse that is broken down and trained. We have been trained to oppress each other. Here's a letter that I would like you to see. I've asked many people if they have heard of this letter and the instructions by Willie Lynch. The word lynching was named after a slave owner who taught other slaves owners how to make a slave. Reading this horrific letter from a speech given in 1712 and seeing how much it has affected our society these days shows where and why we are at this point. We have to reverse the spell of systemic oppression of Lynch syndrome. Equality is that we are all the same in God's eyes. We must take accountability within ourselves and within the systems that promote this dogma that's instituted in our society. So many atrocities have occurred by the teachings of making a slave. Slave is now used negatively, but to serve is a noble and positive word to use. Both words have the same meaning. We as people are slaves to an institution, but we want to serve God righteously. You may ask, and many have, where do we start? For me, it's in my home first, education, and systems that, as previously spoken here, change comes from reform, reform the mind, reform thought, reform soul, reform. So I wanted to read that because it's something that it really hit dear to me. And I hope that it helped to resonate what we're dealing with in today's society. And so with that being said, I just posed questions for the panel, for Jerome, myself, and James to answer in their own way. And I believe with the panels that we have, I'm just gonna give you a raw insight of these questions. And before I go into those questions, I'm gonna ask you these questions, ask you to hold off to answer them, and then I'm gonna play a video. But the question is, what does modern day slavery means or looks like to you? What are issues and or laws that are contributing to modern day slavery? Why does this still exist today? Who do we address to change this narrative? So right now, I'm going to just play a real clip about from Wisconsin PBS Learning Media on Reconstruction Black Codes.
Eugene, I'm gonna ask that you put those questions
In the chat?
in the chat.
I
It'll
can
be
do that.
helpful. You can do it after you start the film or whatever, but that would be helpful.
I will do that for you.
Okay.
In November of 1865, the government that Andrew Johnson had set up in Mississippi passed a set of oppressive laws that applied only to African Americans. Soon, other Southern states followed suit. These laws became known as the Black Codes.
The basic purpose of the Black Codes was to recognize that slavery has been abolished, but to make sure that there is as little change from slavery to freedom as possible.
The key to the Black Codes was what they called vagrancy laws, things like that. Every adult Black person was required to sign a labor contract for the year with a white employer. If they didn't do that, they would be considered a vagrant and they could be fined. And if they couldn't pay the fine, they could be auctioned off to someone who would pay the fine. And then they'd have to work off the fine for that person.
What's even worse than being arrested if you don't have a job is having your children taken away. So your neighbor down the road can go to the courts and say, John Jones, he can't take care of his children. He's indigent, but I'll take them in. And I will train them in farming methods. So I'll train the daughters in housewifery. And I will have their labor, and the parents will get a little bit of money at the end of their period of indenture. But Black parents didn't have a say in this.
A lot of parents are fighting back and saying, no, they don't want their children to be apprenticed. They can take care of them. They also know that in apprenticeship conditions, they can't protect their children from physical and sexual abuse. It becomes a way for the planter class to continue stealing the labor of the children and sometimes stealing the children themselves.
Enforcement of the Black Codes went hand in hand with relentless violence against the freed people.
Outside of cities and towns, the Union Army was shrinking rather than expanding. You're looking at former slaveholders who can't imagine living in a world where slavery doesn't exist if the Union Army is not on the ground and the Freedmen's Bureau is not there to enforce the new rules. Then they were going to do whatever they could to keep the African American population in a state of subordination.
The Ku Klux Klan is created in Tennessee in 1866. It coincides with the creation of Black Codes. You could argue that on some levels that the Klan is doing the same thing that the slave patrols did. During slavery, the slave patrols would make sure people have passes, making sure that they are not loitering. They're not getting together in bands of people. And the Klan is going to do the same type of thing.
You have people who are targeted because they've managed to acquire a decent amount of land, or their children are in school and a white person in their community is struggling at the same time. What they decide is that the way to deal with this is to attack the person, to take away everything they have, to destroy their property, to run them off their land.
At war's end, Frederick Douglass had wondered what new form slavery might take. After 6 months of Andrew Johnson's Reconstruction, the answer was painfully obvious.
Okay, so I've just sent the questions through the chat. And if you need a second, you can have that second. James, I just seen just come on, so I'm gonna give him a proper introduction. James, thank you for being able to be here with us. James is a peer support specialist at Just Dane. And I would like to say that, you know, he's a friend, mentor, uncle, brother to me, as well as Jerome. And if you could, James, real quick, just kind of introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got into this work.
I have to unmute. Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize, first of all, for my delay in getting here. I had a mix up in my schedule. But in any event, I'm James Morgan, lead peer support specialist and trainer through Access to Independence with Just Dane. I assist individuals with lived experience of incarceration, either in the Wisconsin prison system or the jail system, as well as families and others who are in need of services in the community. It looks different for me from day to day. Sometimes that's single individuals, sometimes that's families. It also requires me to be in certain spaces. I also often engage in conversations about, community issues with members of law enforcement, the judiciary, and so forth. So literally, as a lot of people would say, I wear many hats. But my primary goal is to educate people, to create, those relationships that will build and sustain a healthy community for all of us. I'm not one of those who, one of those pie in the sky individuals. What we're dealing with takes intentionality. If we want to see change, if it was intentional to get us to these spaces, it's going to take intention to get us out of some of these spaces. I'll end there and said I'm appreciative of the fact that I was invited to be a part of this panel today. I hope to be able to, answer possibly some of your questions that are in the chat, as well as field any questions that you may have around why we have the problems that we have, and potentially how we can utilize our collective energies and strategies and capacity to think about these things to solve them as well. So again, thank you for having me.
Thank you, James. And appreciate having you and taking time out your busy schedule to be here, you and Jerome. So Jerome, I will ask you first about the first question. What does modern day slavery means or looks like to you?
Well, 1 second. Oh, I'm not muted. Usually I'm muted. What does modern day slavery look like mean to me? Wow, that's a full question there. I could probably go on for the next hour answering that. But I want to say that it's still Jim Crow tactics. On the heels of Reconstruction came the 13th Amendment, which kept individuals in a category of slavery without calling them slave, without using the term slavery, and except being convicted, unless being convicted of a crime. They say slavery is abolished unless a person has been convicted of a crime. And on the heels of that, that was the first form of mass incarceration. A lot of children, men, women were kept into slavery or free labor, which is what it was that this nation pretty much was built on during the periods of slavery. And today, we're still using those Jim Crow tactics, number one, to keep people from voting, because during that period of that short period of Reconstruction, we saw more people of color or African Americans in Congress and in the Senate than ever before in the history of this nation. On the heels of that came the voting tactics or laws that were passed throughout the South, because the states were given the authority to create whatever laws that they felt were needed for the people of that state. And generally they were not for the people of color in those states. You know, if you didn't have a job, I mean, those tactics, if you didn't have a job, you could be incarcerated. Lottery, you could be incarcerated. Or owing money. Someone can buy your debt and you have to work that debt off. Now, I had to go back to that point in time in history to talk about where we are today, because it is a big business. That's why this organization called ALEC, American Legislative Exchange Council, became so interested in the mass incarceration and the prison industrial complex, which is still alive and functioning well today. You would be surprised at the goods that are produced in prisons. Every license plate and every sticker that goes on those license plates, all of that work is done in War Pond Correction. Yet and still, we're paying hundreds of dollars for these license plates. I know my renewal was $100, $109, something like that. I don't know if it's because of specialized plates. I think it's a little higher, but you know, that's all profits. I mean, you're paying. They may make $1 an hour, $8 a day, but that machine is humming all day, and sometimes at night, within the prisons, a maximum security prison. There's prisons that make furniture, and I've been into the warehouse of Badger State Industries. That's what it was called. They've changed the name, but I've been down there and saw the goods, the furniture that's made inside our prisons. And oftentimes, if you walk into a university classroom, most of what you see has been made inside of a prison, or the parts are made in different prisons, and it's assembled in a prison. And those are just a couple of the industries that are alive and functioning well within our own state. I wanted to put emphasis on what's being done here. You have farming going on, which is part of Badger State Industries. I can't think of the new name of it, but you know, a lot of the food and the milk and things that are served to prisoners are done on these farms around the state that are prisons. Just to raise a couple of that. I don't want to dwell on it too long, but that gives you some idea of how it's still functioning. But we can't just look at what's going on. We have to look at cause and effect. And so that's what I hope to do today.
Thank you, Jerome. And I guess I'll pose the same question to James if he has something different to say. Otherwise, we can go to the second question and have that for him.
Well, I think similar to what Jerome is describing, You know, it's a many or multifaceted beast, if I can use that term, because it impacts, you know, the state. It impacts, you know, what we know as the so-called criminal justice system. It impacts individuals, families. There's no way or no place within the culture or the society that this issue does not impact. You know, from a historical perspective, you know, if I were to address a historical perspective, I look at, you know, the terminology, the words, you know, slavery, indentured servitude, you know, the Black codes, the Ku Klux Klan, the violence, you know, all of those things for over 400 years has provided a level of conditioning to a class of people who are seen as non-human, even to this day. You know, there's a struggle right now within the culture and the society to redefine human beings through the power of the language. Its ability to create separatism it runs deep, okay? But at the end of the day, you know, for those who may feel as though, you know, it's just those people, it's not just those people, it's all of us. Because at the end of the day, the power structure, the power elite has certain rules, regulations, guidelines, and language that put us all in the same category. I'm going to use a term that you're all familiar with, minorities. If you are a woman in this country, you're a minority. If you're African American in this country, Asian, whatever the case be, Latino, whatever the case may be, you're a minority. That's the term for slave. People who do not have access to equality and equity. Everything that we're trying to struggle with within our culture. Well, let's talk about here in Dane County, because this is where we are, okay? All of those things that we are confronted with and struggle with, you know, the people who distribute or redistribute the resources, do it with intention and with purpose. And they very rarely consider the long-term impact that it does. And when I speak the term, or when I use the term slavery, I'm not just talking about physical slavery. I'm about psychological, mental, emotional, that keeps people in spaces where they cannot perceive because they don't have the capacity to. They only know what they know by experience, what is happening to them, what is happening to the lack of education that's being provided to their children in the schools, the lack of medical attention that's required or necessary, okay, to live a quality life, access to quality food, okay, within these communities that are experiencing food deserts. So if you want to talk about slavery, observe it because it's right in front of you every day. It may be a term that's highly emotional, okay? It requires, or it may make you feel a certain way. But I can guarantee you that if you begin to really pay attention to it and you see these areas of impact, you can really begin to understand, okay, what happened constitutionally to say that a person convicted of a crime. We deal with that right now. You know, Jerome and them have a campaign now, Unlock the Vote, okay? Convicted of a crime. You're denied citizenship, okay? Being denied citizenship and going back and looking at my own family history and the histories of the hundreds and thousands of people that I've reviewed, slaves weren't considered citizens, they were property, okay? And so this economic thing that's connected to it, and I've talked to so many people about it, okay? The private prison industry, the juvenile industry, right now the push to turn Mendota institution into a facility for girls as well as boys. You know, our young children are being funneled into these systems that deny them the opportunity to participate in what is supposed to be one of the freest countries in the world. How can we not address these issues? How can we not talk about them? How can we not take the time and energy that we possess and the wisdom and the knowledge and the education, you know, to begin to push back against this. Okay. And we're behind. I can guarantee you we're behind because the people who benefit from this, they are well aware of the power that they possess. Okay. With the stroke of a pen today can change what the future for one child in this country is going to look like for their entire lifetime. With one word, minority. That's slavery.
Thank you, James. Thank you. Well put. And I think this second question, we've kind of hit it already, but for those who just came on, I think this will help kind of bring it back to where we started, to asking Jerome, what are issues and or laws that are contributing to modern day slavery?
Okay, well, I'm going to just be frank with you. The 94 crime bill, and since we're talking modern day slavery, the 94 crime bill invested billions, 26 billions back in 94 into building prisons, passing laws, state laws, and federal laws that would incarcerate people for longer times and more people. The war on drugs was devastating to particularly one group of people, and that was Black African-American people. I mean, we were traumatizing families with battery rams, no knock warrants, just coming in the doors, and being someone who spent time in a federal prison, I witnessed personally busload after busload of individuals coming into those prisons that I was in. I was in Sandstone, Minnesota, and Oxford, Wisconsin, 2 federal prisons. And I witnessed 17, 18, 19-year-olds coming into that prison with 25, 30, 40 years for drugs. There was a law change in the late 80s and 87, which was the first truth in sentencing. We called it the new law. In the federal system, they addressed it as the new law, which indicated that individuals would no longer be eligible for parole. And you had to do a minimum of 85% of the time that you were sentenced. These young men coming into those prisons, predominantly Black young adults or young men, particularly in this case where I was, 85% of 40 years, 85% of 30 years. That's the prime of their lives for drugs. Many of them indicated having talked to some of them who were breaking down in tears, who weren't kingpins, but merely lookouts, individuals who would say, look out for law enforcement. We know the drug trade was huge. We do not make planes or have boats and bring that into this country. It was bought into this country and deliberately distributed in our communities. There's no doubt. The fact is there's an equation that Black and whites use drugs at equal amounts, but who was going to jail for them? Who was serving these long periods of time? What it looks like to me today, unlock the vote. I mean, on the heels of the voting rights, the 64 voting rights, came felony disenfranchisement. It escalated right on the heels of voting rights, that it was intentional that many states denied permanent disenfranchisement, that meaning that if you're convicted of a felon, you can never vote again in your life. There's been some turn in that, but there's still several states in this country now, one felony conviction and you're barred from voting for the rest of your life. That is another form, another consequence of the laws that are being passed. I know Wisconsin, and I really want to put the spotlight on our state because we have been immune to any forms of reform, criminal justice reform, any forms of it. Many of the southern states have surpassed us in passing new laws that loosen the reins of felony disenfranchisement. There's so many consequences to having a felony conviction, period. But we can't ignore that small communities within our state are using the head count or counting those who are in the prisons in those communities as citizens of those communities. Now, in one case, we are not citizens, but in another case, when it comes to prison gerrymandering, we are citizens. 75% of the city of Waupun, 75% of the citizens counted in the city of Waupun are individuals who are incarcerated in Dodge County within Waupun. Waupun has a couple of large prisons, but 75%. Why is that? It gives them more seats. It gives them more dollars that are coming from the federal government. And that's for 10 years. That's we're counted every 10 years in the census. If I'm in Waupun in 2020 when they counted, and I got out in 2021, that money does not stop going to Waupun. It goes to them until 2030 when we have another census. In the meantime, I'm coming back to the community of Milwaukee or even Madison. There's no dollars connected to my head count as a citizen of Madison. I spent 1 year in Waupun for the next 10 years that reaping benefits. And it expands the seats of those small communities who vote different from I do, and for many of us would, because of the platform that these individuals who are running a platform that they're running for office on, they wouldn't get our vote, but yet and still they get representation based on the citizenship of that county, which many are prisoners. I don't want to go too long. I just wanted to touch on that. So how are laws contributing to this continuance of slavery? Mass incarceration is in place. For the last 30 years, our prison system has been lingering around 2 million, 2.5 million, and it has not changed. It has not changed.
So, and I'm glad that you brought that up. And I feel, Jerome, like every word that you say out your mouth is very important to hang on to. So that's why I give you the floor to talk, because people need to hear these things, you know, like the census. I don't think a lot of people know about the census and how they're gerrymandering those census like that in prison. Also know that, like, you know, back in the 90s, war on drugs, I was directly impacted by that because my mother went sent to prison when I was in elementary school for 14 years. And so that had effects on, you know, my childhood and how I grew up and all those things. So like, these are things that are very important to bring up and talk about. So I really appreciate that.
I want to just chap in on something you said. Your mother went to prison for 14 years. Many times these individuals are getting 25, 30 years for non-assaultive, have non-assaultive cases for being addicts. And it's nothing new. We came back from Vietnam. We came back because I served time in the US military. We came back from Vietnam, addicted to, I mean, traumatic experience being there and seeing your buddies falling on bungee sticks or stepping on landmines. You know, we didn't get treatment for that. I witnessed 3 murders growing up, and I never got treatment for that. And we're still traumatizing kids today, leaving bodies laying in the streets. We gotten better here in Madison. We do put up a tent around the body when there's a homicide, but you know, we're not getting the treatment that we need. I just want to add that. Sorry.
Well, thank you, Jerome. James, I pose that next question to you. What are issues or laws that are contributing to the modern day slavery?
Okay, well, you know, Jerome, rightfully so, has pointed out a lot in and of itself. I want to go back a little further because he mentioned Vietnam. And I had relatives that came back from Vietnam who, you know, had some very traumatic experiences, found, you know, like many veterans when they returned back to this country, that, you know, they were being pushed to the side, that they didn't matter, that their addictions, that the loss of their limbs and their mental health meant nothing to the people who sent them into war. Okay, and then you had the Rockefellers in the 60s and the 70s. This is pre-Bill Clinton and all these other laws to address crime and criminality in the country. And I think one of the major things that's missing in that discussion is that it was a war, and it is a war. And the tools of war have been applied and they continue to be applied. What happened in many of our communities that led to a lot of what we're seeing that can be described, I'll use the term war as collateral damage, simply comes out of the fact that our communities, the tool for war, and it continues, is propaganda. And the other one is economic destabilization. Okay, manufacturing jobs, well-paying jobs that supply people with the opportunity to move out of poverty. All of those things disappeared. Okay, and for those of you, I can't determine anybody's age. If you remember Oliver North and Eugene Hassenfuss, and all of these drug transactions that began to happen. We had national judicial meetings about it all. And at the end of the day, there's no accountability for the collateral damages that have happened to so many people, okay, in so many places across this nation. Again, we're here in the state of Wisconsin. And I would behoove you to not believe that that impact is not being felt here. Okay, because it is. You can see it in the denial of housing for people who have allegedly committed crimes. You see it, as Jerome was speaking, in the inability to vote. You see it in the communities of confinement that he talked about. You know, the prisons and those numbers of people counted as citizens where they can acquire those tax dollars so that they could have better schools, better housing, and all of these other things that are denied to people once they leave those facilities, returning to their community. Those dollars are being spent in Waupun and other places. And so, you know, this is a reality. And a lot of times we don't understand it. We don't feel as though that there's a direct impact. We don't feel as though, and I'm using the term feel intentionally, because, you know, when I engage people, people will say, you know, I feel. And again, this is going to take some strategic thinking, planning, and even above all of that is accountability. We have public officials, we have a governor, we have a county exec, we have a mayor, we have all these individuals who are supposed to be the leaders. okay? And are determining the outcomes, okay? For the people that we have in our communities, our brothers, our sisters, our children, our aunts, our uncles, our fathers, and they are distanced from the reality of what the daily life of exists for the people who they are there to serve, okay? They are to serve, all right? So I think we have to have more intentionality when we're in these spaces to say, okay, this is good. We have a forum, we can talk about it, but then what happens? What action steps come after? Those action steps began with the word accountability. Who do we begin to hold accountable? Okay, we have the historical record, all right? We have what's happening now, okay? We have what's going to be happening as we move forward in this place that we call the future, okay? And it's already shifting. It's already shifting, okay? It's shifting because everybody's saying, well, there's COVID. Okay, well, there's COVID. There's been pandemics worldwide since the beginning of history, okay? And human beings have found a way, okay, to begin to manage, okay, whether it's a COVID, whether it's a war, and I'm not negating the fact that there's a whole lot going on in the world right now. But what we're concerned about is what's happening here, what's happening now. The people that we see are being denied citizenship, even some of those who aren't felons, who haven't committed crimes. Okay, just so happen to be in relationship with someone who unfortunately may have been, okay? Because I know you all, like I do, I pay attention, and I have not seen in the last month or the weeks that have gone by where I'm not seeing something on the news where somebody's being released from one of these prisons who was absolutely innocent. Spent 20, 30, 40 years of their lives in a cage. All right, denied citizenship. Denied equal representation under the law, or the law shifts and all of a sudden the detriment to them is heightened, is carried on for the continuance of their lives, okay? We see it with the so-called criminal justice system, all right? It's shifting. They no longer see the need to put people in cages. They'll do it by putting an animal tracker on your ankle. Okay, if that's not inhumane, what is? We won't put tracking systems on dogs.
Yeah.
All right. So, and in terms of this question, those are the issues of modern day enslavement, of modern day degradation of the human heart, the human soul, the human spirit. And we have the audacity to say that we lead the world. We'll spend billions overseas and won't take care of home.
Mm.
Okay, I think this would have been called, the shame of a nation. The shame of a nation. All right, and I'm not going to let people run out there and start talking about what Dr. King said, Dr. King or this person, and love and peace and happiness everywhere when we know this reality. It's not what it is. I nowhere in my heart or my mind that I believe that a Dr. King would have sat back and remained silent in the face of this, period. Okay, so, I can't do it here, I know, but Eugene, I apologize, man.
No. This is no. This is why I asked you and Jerome to come on, because I want us to be really uncut and direct. So this is why I asked you guys to come on.
I get it, but here's the thing that I don't want to happen. Here's the thing that I don't want to happen, because I can't see the faces of the people right now. Okay, mm-hmm. I'd love to be able to see the faces of the people who inhabit this space. Because mm-hmm. the one thing that I want them to know, that this is not a push in any way to place upon you any form of guilt for what has happened.
Right.
Okay? Because whether you understand it, whether you can see it, whether you can digest it or not, you've been impacted too. Okay? You've been harmed in so many ways. Okay, number one is the ability to connect with another human being that has a different experience from you. And that's how we learn from one another. That's how we grow with one another. That's how we begin to heal one another. That's how we begin to solidify our collective power. Okay, to make the change that's necessary and needed. Okay, and we also understand that everybody has different talents. We also know that some people can't be in this space because, you know, there are people who will say you in that space and you over there and you talk about, you know, well, you don't have a job now. We get it, but your contribution is needed and necessary. People are always talking about the power of speaking and the power of your voice, and it is indeed powerful. Okay, for a person like me who's on parole, who doesn't have the right to vote, your voice on my behalf matters. That matters because I'm a grandfather. I'm a husband. I pay taxes. I can't go into that booth and say, this is the person that's best qualified to lead the nation, to lead this state. Okay, when it comes to addressing homelessness, unemployment, education. Okay, don't assume that just because, you know, at one particular point in time in my life, I was uneducated. One point in my life, I didn't possess the ability to communicate the need that I saw in my family or even for myself. And many of you have been there. Okay.
So, and I think, you know, that kind of segues, and we've already addressed this question already without even asking the question, is who do we address these issues with? Who do we address to change the narrative? Who do we address on this? And I think you've said it, Jerome said it, it's by, you know, our representatives, right? It's by us being able to vote, by people using your voice when you can vote to vote for the right things, right? If I'm missing something, by all means, Jerome.
Let me just add to your list. If I may. Let me add to your list. Tony Evers, the mayor, the county exec, educators, people on the university campus, okay? People in the medical field, okay? People who you know, are in law enforcement. You know, I thought our sheriff was going to be here today. I'd love to have heard some of his responses. You know, everybody, the people who are being impacted, we have to begin to open up spaces where, and I'm going to be intentional again, I don't want to hear their stories. I want them to address their realities. Okay? Address your reality. Let's stop belittling people by saying it's a story. I read the story. Oh, it was so exciting, or it was so depressing. And I have such great empathy, and nothing gets done. These are daily realities when someone can't eat. That's not a story. When someone walks into one of these medical facilities and don't have the capacity or understand what their rights are in terms of getting quality medical care. Okay, those are the people we need to be addressing to change the narratives. Okay, but then just changing to the narrative is not enough. Okay, because he who holds the pen writes the story. The narrative changes when there's specific actions attached to it. Okay, to change those policies, to train people if we must, to be able to communicate and deal with people who are different from what they are, okay, or what they appear to be, whether that's based on color, skin color, or this beautiful melanin that's in my skin, okay, or whether it's gender, you know, because there's a mass push for people to identify. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, because I want to engage with people who have a sense of who they are first, okay, and what they're willing to invest in, inside of themselves and outside of themselves. That's how we build collective action. That's how we build collective community, okay? So we also need to bring in, and I'm not gonna hold back, we need to bring in some of these religious organizations, all right, who have different things or different projects, and millions of dollars are being funneled in, you know, to what it is they believe is needed and necessary, you know, and still not be connected to the needs of the community. If you can't have that in that space, in a sacred space, something's wrong. Something's wrong. So, you know, the individual or the individuals who, through, whether it's through their faith, through their prayer life, or whatever it may be, okay, are invested with enough courage to do exactly what we're doing right here, right now, is to find a way to continue to move it forward. Move it forward, move it forward, move it forward. Expect resistance. That way you won't be disappointed when it happens.
Yeah.
Okay, have a goal. Let's figure out the necessary steps to achieve those goals.
Well, I appreciate that, James. And real quick, I know Jerome has taken his valuable time to be here, and I want to give him at least a minute or two to just say what he has to say, then we can close out.
Okay, well, I appreciate that, Eugene. I've been blessed being here. I don't think there's anything I can say that can add on to who we need to talk to or who needs to hear this. James covered he covered that well. I want to say though, in closing, you know, I opened the paper this morning. I see where another $1 billion is being spent on a war that, I mean, I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying, why hasn't there been an investment when we invested $26 billion to build and put in place the laws that have us in this place today? Where's the investment in changing those, you know, changing the lives of individuals who have been impacted by these overreaching political, I don't want to say plots or anything like that, but the overreaching laws that have been put in place that has our state with a small prison system with a 1.2 billion, well, actually it's $2.6 billion every physical cycle that's budgeted and has not moved in the last 10 years. Where's the investment that we can start investing in our schools, investing in individuals being trained for good paying jobs in our community, investment in the housing that's needed for individuals who cannot afford to live in this city, to be honest with you, but where rent is taking up 60–70% of their income. You know, there's so much we can do. You know, if we really have a shift. My grandmother, my grandfather came here as refugees. They were fleeing from a state where they were lynching. My grandmother witnessed her brother hanging from a tree and another brother killed by the sheriff. And so the remaining 11 of them headed north because it was hostile environment. We didn't come, you know, we didn't come to these cities just because. Many of us left the South as refugees fleeing for our lives. We need to invest. I do. And I do have a doctor's appointment, Eugene. I think I told you that.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna have to head out of here. So I'll be there on time.
Yeah.
But I want to thank you for having me here.
And I thank you for being here. And you know, your time is valuable. And
I see James. I want to hear what James has to say while I'm.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the chat, and
okay,
know, it says plain devil's advocate. When employers are hesitant to hire formerly incarcerated, how much of that hesitancy is based on fear that the crime will come to their establishment if the person is hired. Okay, all right. That's not a devil's advocate question. That's
It's
a
not.
legitimate question.
It's not.
Okay, for somebody who applied for over 500 jobs in this city and didn't get a single call back, I understand that. Some employers may have an irrational fear of hiring someone who has a felony conviction. 9 times out of 10, what they fail to understand, or the conversations that they, fail to want to engage in, is that most of the time, particularly at our agency, that person is, and I don't like, language is a thing for me, is vetted prior to, okay? And that hesitancy may be based on something that has come from the Department of Corrections. When an individual goes in and says, I put in an application, they're willing to hire me, and that there may be a follow-up call by the parole agent that instills a sense of fear in that potential employer. So that could be one barrier. The other barriers that may cause one to hesitate is that, there are policies that exist that says, if I'm a bank robber, I should not be applying for a job at a bank. Okay, and most people are rational enough to not do that. But what most people are desiring and wanting in this situation is to be able to have some sense of independence when it comes to earning an income. Most of the people that I've worked with, and I've worked with hundreds who are gainfully and fully employed, those employers come seeking people, all right? Particularly in the economy right now, where the criminal conviction doesn't matter because they need reliable people to show up. I've got guys and women who are working double time and triple time on those jobs, building productive relationships with their employers. So I would suggest that those employers who have some hesitancy about it, contact us over at Just Day. We'll sit down and have some conversations with them. And we need more of that. We need more conversations. We need more interaction between this demographic and population of people with people who own businesses in this city, in this county, okay? And to be treated fairly when they're in that space. Because a lot of times a person who has a felony conviction gets hired at a company or a business, and then perhaps out of curiosity, maybe 1 or 2 of the other employees go and look them up on CCAP, okay, and start to harass, all right? And they don't want to be in environments where they're going to be harassed because they have a felony conviction on their record, okay? They're there to serve a specific purpose. And so if HR is on their job and a person who has a felony is in that space and goes to them and say, hey, I'm uncomfortable because this is a situation that I'm having to deal with in this work environment. What are you willing to assist me with in alleviating this situation so I can continue to be the employee that you need, the employee that you want, okay? So there are a number of factors. I can't just gloss over this. I'd like to have a deeper conversation about it, because our agency has been training businesses and employers on why it's a good thing to hire individuals who do have felony convictions or, as said, some sort of involvement with the criminal justice system.
Plus they get bondage too, right? They get like
Yeah, they can qualify for certain federal funds for hiring people. They can be bonded. There's a lot of things, and we noticed I'd say it's been about 10 years ago that when the economy was really struggling, that a lot of employers really wasn't even able to accept that. They wouldn't even accept that. Okay, but that's changing in some areas. We're glad that it's changing because it gives people an opportunity to bring their particular talents and skills, and also provide a way for them to have some sort of stability in their lives, to be able to reunite with their families. We all know that without some sort of economic sustenance, people are on the streets, people are desperate, And what does desperation lead to? It leads to crime. It leads to people being harmed and hurt. And, it leads to alcoholism and drug addiction and mental health. Okay. And that ain't just people that look like me. For those who want to, or may have somewhere in their mind, and to get it, I understand. That's why I talked about the use of propaganda, that when you think about or when you feel certain things, the image of someone who looks like me is the first thing that you see. And it causes a level of fear and anxiety. I just saw it at the DMV. Okay, nice shirt, tie on, everything else. And I went in there and people were like, okay. And I have great empathy for them. Very great empathy. Okay, because I'm always, please, thank you. How are you doing today? Have a nice day. But that's not what they're accustomed to when they see a person who they define as a Black man or a Black male in this culture and in this society. And it's taken us a long time to get there. But that propaganda tool is a beast.
Yeah, I was at a friend's restaurant and helping them out the other day, and there was this lady who was sitting over by the bar, and then I walked around by her and came back around by the bar, and she clenched her purse. And it's like, I'm not going to take your purse, but that narrative that's been brought on for her to just naturally clench her purse, whether she knew it or not, and it gave me this look like, I just want to make sure my purse was here. It's, you see those, you can identify those, but a lot of people who might be in that state might not even realize that. But that's a condition.
It's truly sad, and that's the word, the conditioning. The conditioning. We're in these, and this is just an analogy, I think, for me, we've been in this space, we've been in this hamster cage, okay? And it goes this way, and then it stops, and then it goes back, and then it stops again, and then it goes again. Somebody comes along and the media pays attention and they will tell a fascinating story of this one situation or this one circumstance, as though other human beings aren't capable of compassion, empathy, okay, sharing, collective goal seeking and assistance because of how they look, because of the texture of their hair, because of their gender. Okay, that propaganda tool has been utilized against us, okay, since the signing of this thing called the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. For those of you who haven't done it, go, and if you have, go back and look at it again. Look at the documentary, The 13th. Look at it, because it gives you a historical line of why these conditions exist. Okay, I mean, Michelle Alexander and them and the producers of that documentary and so many others have done some fantastic research and work intended to do what? Raise our consciousness, to take us above that level, that thing called fear
There's
of the other human being.
There's a saying that a fellow that I know of, he said that if I can get you to think, you'll save yourself.
Well, I mean, that's a challenge to get people to think.
Yeah.
When we work with young people, when I work with young people who people right now are still planning to lock up and put in cages, and not understanding that they're in that process of their youth, of growth. They're looking at the behaviors, they're looking at the reactions and not the responses that these potential human beings have. They're not looking at the physical things that are happening to them. Their hormones are changing. There's so many other things that they don't even understand, and they don't have support. They don't have, adults in those spaces to educate them and to talk about them, to them and with them about what it is they're feeling, the changes in their bodies. I had a young man the other day was talking to me about his first, he's going through puberty and he's wondering what's happening. Okay, as though that's odd. All right, that's natural. This is the way we were created as human beings. You're going to experience these things. There's no reason for you to feel shame. because your body and your voice and all these other things are changing. Okay, and your peer group is not understanding that, and they're getting their information or other resources through where? Through the media that portrays them as villains and thugs and dope dealers, and they're not seeing the quality of attention that's being paid to young girls in our cultural society. Black girls rock, they're this, they're that. I haven't seen a single commercial that talks about the value of young Black boys. So they're feeling isolated and alone. And of course they're acting out. And how is the culture and the society trying to respond to that? Let's lock them up. Let's put them in a cage. Those are things that we should fear. They're exempling, what it means to be Black in America. Why?
Yeah.
You ask that 2-year-old question over and over again. Why? Why? Okay, because if you don't feel connected, and I'm speaking to the little boy, the James in me when I was a kid, if you feel disconnected and unwanted and unbelieved in, and you're carrying buckets of shame, okay, and you're only seeing what the culture of society tells you is excellence every now and then, and then you have no connection to even the every now and then, the successful people. If I don't play sports, if I don't go into the military, okay, all of this other stuff, then I have no value. I have no worth.
So Deanna Grant said, the ripple effect of trauma from lynching, wrongful incarceration, discrimination, etc., has a far-reaching impacts and is so ingrained in our systems and laws. What do you propose are the best ways to undo all of these methods of modern day slavery in addition to having honest conversations?
Well, I think it has to begin here. And, there were structures put in place that disallowed that conversation to happen. Political correctness. I can't have a conversation with you because it's going to hurt my feelings. If I share with you my beliefs and my ideas and they're counter to who you are as another human being, I can't have an honest conversation. Okay. A friend of mine from England and myself did a presentation on this 10 years ago over at First Unitarian Society. People were amazed, but our conversation was around the impact and the dangers of political correctness. Okay, now here's a person from England who observed this country, from the outside, has been here for I don't know how long. Okay, connected to the university system, beautiful, very intelligent, caring woman, looks nothing like me. Before our presentation, this is what we did because we wanted to stun people into listening. For this presentation, she wore all Black. I wore all white and a skirt. Okay? But we talked about, and we wanted to watch the reactions of people when we walked into the room. They're saying, oh, here's a little old white woman and all this Black. And what is James doing? Is he straight? Is he what? Okay. But we did it all to prove a point. Because instead of guessing or attempting to assume, not a single person asked the question out of fear of being accused of being racist, of not understanding, and all of these other things. And we were highly ready, prepared to answer those questions. Still am. Okay. But so, it begins with the conversation. It begins with getting away of the political correctness or expecting every space to be a safe space because it's not going to be a safe space. That's why I'm scared for some of our young people, because these spaces are being created where they can't have honest and open dialogue, even on the college campus. Try to go on the college campus and talk about Willie Lynch and see what happens. I got disinvited one time because of that. But in any event, we have to have the honest conversation. We have to look at these spaces and areas where we can begin to collectively hold people accountable for the laws and policies that are being written that impact the everyday lives of people. We have to go inside ourselves and have an honest examination of who we know ourselves to be, who we believe ourselves to be, who we are in this moment, who we still have the capacity to become individually and collectively. We need to pay attention to the messaging that's happening that continues to create these spaces of separation and fear of one another. I'm not to say that there should not be, because fear can be a positive thing too in certain situations and circumstances. Understand that fully. I would never want anybody to put themselves in a space where they feel jeopardized or in imminent harm. Okay, so time, intentionality, self-analysis. What am I willing to sacrifice? Because this is about sacrifice. People don't get that. They say, I'm here to serve. Yeah, serving is one thing, but it may take a level of sacrifice at one particular point in time where you feel or think, or you just know you cannot continue, okay, to advocate for others and not advocate for yourself. Okay, but in advocating for others, get this, you are advocating for yourself. All right, because I can tell you, reading some of the historical novels and all of the books, and looking back at the Holocaust, and man's search for meaning and all of these other things, that we are connected. We are connected. So I'm not, don't get it wrong here. James Morgan is not sitting here and saying that what's happening in the Ukraine should not matter. Okay, James Morgan is not saying what's happening in this land that we call Africa, okay, does not matter. I'm not saying that what's happening in Great Britain and all of these other things, because it is all connected. Yeah. But we have to be cognizant. We have to be intentional. We have to be aware of what's happening here and the place that we call home. Okay, what foundations are being set right now? Because I'm concerned about it for your grandchildren, for my granddaughter. Okay, for what's going to be available to me as I age and get into that space where I don't even think I'll ever be able to retire. But in any event, what's going to be there to secure me and my family, okay, and my community, and the state that I currently live in? Okay, what does that look like?
Yeah, so Maria, who just left, she wanted to leave this, and I like the time. It says 3:33. I like those numbers. Okay. But she said, "Thank you, Eugene, James, and Jerome. I need to leave early, but wanted to thank you all for your time, information, insight, and activism. I work for the City of Madison Engineering Department and plan to take this conversation to our team to ensure we incorporate felony disenfranchisement and other ideas discussed today in our work." So that's what's up.
Appreciate that. And, extend the invitation for further conversation if needed or necessary. I'm not the only one. There's others that can engage in this.
Oh yeah, there's a whole group of people that we can definitely come back and do this on another level too. So I really appreciate your time and you making time to be able to do this. You and Jerome, I appreciate everyone that came to listen. I appreciate our person in the background doing all the tech stuff. So with that being said, we're going to close up, and I hope this was very informative. And thank you, Deanna. And yeah, James, we're going to connect real soon here, and get some work together. And I know Deanna wants to do some work as well. She has some ideas that I think might interest the both of us to be able to, kind of brainstorm. So,
well, I want to say something here. Just because out of transparency, I come out of a place called Saginaw, Michigan, 100 miles north of Detroit. I've lived in Florida. I've lived in Texas. I've moved around the country. And a lot of it was due to the fact that as a young person, the only solution that I had for any of what was happening to me was to run, was to escape. I was talking to someone earlier today, and I remember my father, who was absent in the home from the very beginning. I remember him visiting Saginaw, Michigan one day and saying to me, as soon as you get the chance, get out of here. Okay. And he drove me around the city and he showed me these homes where when he was a kid, that family lived there. That family still lives there. The members of that family, they're gonna die there. Get out of there. Okay. So and in my mind, I really didn't understand it because he was talking about all of this external, this physical stuff. Okay. But as the years progressed and as I sat in these different prisons and all of these other things, it took on a different meaning for me. I didn't want to be the person who carried all of that trauma that didn't belong to me with me. Okay. I didn't want to just be that person who lived his whole entire life like many of our people do in a 13 square block and not have a worldview or have the capacity or the ability to participate in it. I no longer wanted to be that individual. I had to let a whole lot go that I didn't understand. Okay. And trust that by experience, by education, and by all of these other tools, even in the face of people telling me they won't let you. You can't. You don't have an education. You don't speak the language. Okay. I've been intentional. Even when they told me here, and right up here at the Department of Corrections, Mr. Morgan, you're gonna have to live your life small. And I knew that that wasn't just reference towards me. It was reference to people who had had my similar experience and those that were to come. And I see them when I'm over there with the kids at East High School. I see them when I'm at the home, what they call the homeless shelter. I prefer to say people or persons without homes, because we have to humanize one another.
Mm-hmm.
We have to figure out this thing. We may, and this is not a top-down process. I can guarantee you, it's going to have to come from the bottom up. You know, people talk about the civil rights movement and marches and everything else that happens. This is going to be what, for lack of a better term, a bottom-up process. Okay. We may have to figure out how we began to hold regular rallies right up here at the state capitol and start calling people out. Okay, start looking at who can and cannot vote and those who aren't capable of understanding the human condition, not just the economics of it all, not just the collection of the data, but this is real human beings. These are real children. These are real mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters. These are real educators. Okay, these are real doctors and lawyers and everybody else. And we're all in this same space.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't think in my lifetime I'm going to get the opportunity to see that even at 63 years old, because it took over 400 years of conditioning of all of us
Mm-hmm.
to get to this space.
Well said, James. Well said. Again, I appreciate it, and we'll connect soon. And thank you all for coming up. And Josue, thank you for being our tech person. You're awesome. You've been doing a lot of stuff. So hope to see you soon too.